Hey guys, coming at you post spring break with a lesson on topographic mapping. So, for the duration of the semester, you're going to have to learn how to read maps of different landscapes. And so, I want to teach you today how to follow the legend and then also be able to interpret 2D maps in a 3D kind of dimension. So, on each topographic map, you're going to find a legend that indicates some of the different landforms, including obviously mountainous regions, depressions, valleys, water related landforms. So you're also going to find a scale on the map, and the scale is a ratio that represents distance on the map relative to distance in the real world. So on this scale, for example, 1 inch represents 24,000 inches in real world. You'll also see that there are distance scales in miles and feet. And then there's a contour interval, which represents the difference in elevation between adjacent contour lines. And so contour lines are really the key to reading these topographic maps because contour lines show us elevation change. So looking at this map, this is from Cuyahoga Valley National Park, which is up near the Cleveland area. And you can look at these brown lines and you can see that there are areas where the brown lines are closer together and areas where they're further apart. Sometimes they form like concentric ring patterns like we see here. Sometimes they form kind of these like we see here. And those are indicative of the landscape and what's happening. And so what contour lines are basically a line that connects equal points of elevation on a map. And so in this area of northeastern Ohio, we've got a big valley that is separated by some ridges. And where those ridges exist, you can kind of see actually, I'm going to kind of pull this down here. Maybe it's hard to see with the tree cover. You can see here on the right where these lines are closer together. There's a pretty drastic change in elevation over less distance. Where they're further apart, like here and here, there's a more gradual change in elevation over distance. You can also see waterways on this map, obviously. The Cuyahoga River is shown here. And it kind of meanders around like that through kind of a wider floodplain. And then you got some creeks adjacent to that, like Brandywine Creek. So based on just the proximity or closeness of contour lines, you can determine what the landscape looks like. So here's an aerial map of that same area. Harder to see really change in elevation here, but you can see the meander of the Cuyahoga River, which is right here. Also down here. All right, so moving on, here's another national park. This one's out in Oregon. This is Crater Lake National Park. And here you can see that the contour lines are very closely spaced, so much so that they kind of blend, especially in this area around Crater Lake itself. So I'm going to show you what an aerial map of this looks like. But the fact that the contour lines, they don't overlap, but they're so close, tells us that this area around the lake is very, very steep. You can also see kind of some concentric rings right here with closely spaced contours. That's indicative of a mountain. It's a little mountain here. It's called actually Wizard Island, and I'll show you an example of what that looks like from above. You can also see some areas where there are streams flowing away from the lake itself. The lake isn't the source, but the steep landscape enables water to flow down a gradient. So you can see that here, and from the map you can see that the contour lines in these little stream valleys form V's that point upstream. So that's another feature that we see on this Crater Lake map. Now here's an aerial image. It's harder to see. If you were to go to Google Earth and look at this in a third dimension, you'd see that these areas right here, kind of right here, represent those really steep areas. It drops about, gosh, I think from the ridge to the bottom of the lake, it drops about a mile in elevation. So it's crazy. And then Wizard Island here is a mountainous little area that pops up within the lake itself. And then you can see some of those stream areas kind of here. All right. Another example, here's Grand Canyon National Park, and here we have even a steeper gradient, although it's hard to see. The contour interval here is much bigger. I think on the Cuyahoga River Valley map it was 20 feet. Here the index contours are, I think, 1,000 feet apart. So the darker colored brown lines are 1,000 feet apart. Obviously a very steep terrain, and you guys have seen this in pictures, photographs, and also aerial images. Here's another perspective of that. So this flat area up here by Grandeur Point is the flat area right here on this aerial map. And you can see that the contour lines are spaced farther apart. You can see some buildings. This is Grand Canyon Village right here. And so also some roadways and whatnots. Where the canyon starts to drop off dramatically is right here. And it's hard to see again with this aerial image, but this would be that steep cliff right there. You can see right here, there's kind of a narrow, almost peninsula of land that mimics this right here. So you can really, once you understand the contour lines, you can really grasp what's happening in 3 dimensions on these 2D maps. Here's another one, Yosemite National Park. Yosemite Valley runs through the park. And so here's a little snapshot of what that looks like from up above. So flatter area, obviously, around here where the river runs, and then steeper terrain up here by Upper Yosemite Falls and Lower Yosemite Falls, and over here by Moraine Dome. And so you can kind of get a sense for what the landscape looks like. This is Half Dome right here. Half Dome, I don't know if it's, oh, there it is right here. That's that crazy cliff face that free solo climber ascended. So really kind of crazy to think about looking at these in 2 dimensions and then translating to 3 dimensions. And then I've attached also a video. I'll upload this video on Schoology so you can kind of get a tour of some of these national parks in photographs. So in addition to the maps and then aerial photographs, you can see what these landforms look like in the real world. So that's it for today. And this week you're going to be doing the lab activity number 14, looking at topographic maps and interpreting some of the images. I did upload 3 maps into that topographic mapping folder on Schoology for you to access to help with that. I think there's a couple of exercises in that lab. So signing off for now. Stay tuned for more next week.